Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait,
I'm Bob Anthony.
and we are pre-taping the Thursday before our Monday air. It's being brought to you by the good graces of EVT Educational Productions, Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and Zoom. And the second impeachment of Donald Trump is ongoing as we speak. The prosecutors slash managers, depending on whether you're being technical or not, are in their second day of making their case. And we'll see how the outcome is, which we might comment on before we close our show. but because how media is handling this and how media has played a role in leading up to this impeachment, we're going to try to look at media and media stories slightly through the lens of the impeachment, because correct me if I'm wrong, but Bob, isn't there a number of stories that have percolated because of actions that led up to this impeachment?
Yeah, I mean a number of media companies have made changes. They've made adjustments. There's been pushback on certain types of coverage, and so yeah, the never mind the hearing itself, the things. The pieces around it have definitely affected the media landscape, and I guess we can take a peek at some of those.
Yeah, for what the key one for me, and it's worth at least reminding folk that part of the big lie that Donald Trump and his supporters pushed was that the election was stolen and that it was a fraud and that Joe Biden didn't win and that were all kinds of shenanigans. And a lot of the right-wing media and their pundits made the mistake of calling out companies by name to claim that they helped steal the election. And two of them have filed suits. I believe Dominion filed the first suit against um, Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell and folks like that, to the tune
I
of
believe so. Yes.
1.3 billion. And then bring us up to date on Smartmatic. Smartmatic just filed against whom, Bob? Do you recall?
Well, yeah, I believe Smartmatic went after not only they went after not only just Fox, but they went after I believe Janine Pirro, Maria. It was it Maria Bartiromo, and uh,
And
and
the big,
and Mr. Hannity.
no, Lou
No,
Dobbs.
Lou Dobbs. Excuse me.
The Hannity too?
Right.
Dobbs.
No,
I'll have
right.
to go back and check on Hannity, but I'm pretty
No,
sure.
no, no. But I think he was a little bit more careful. But yeah, it was Dobbs,
Dobbs.
and yes, and because of their insistence on repeating the false claims of a stolen, not only a stolen election, but the repeating that these companies provided software and hardware that somehow stole the election or flipped votes, and they said it out loud. So what did Smartmatic do? They what, a $1.5 billion suit
Somewhere in
against.
either 1.5, 1.7. I mean,
Yeah,
there
it
are a lot
was
of billion
big.
dollar suits floating around. So I think,
Yes,
yeah, 1.5 is close.
yes, and I'll have to check what I have on my screen on the other screen. But yeah, it definitely affected the big shots at at Fox and these other outfits like Newsmax. Uh, all of a sudden,
OAN, Newsmax,
yes,
and Fox. Yeah, go ahead.
and all of a sudden they can feel the fire of losing, the fire of these lawsuits on their hindquarters, and they're reacting. All of a sudden, it's costing them money, which is unfortunately what it takes to get a reaction out of some of these huge right-wing um, uh, quote unquote media outlets.
Yeah,
So
the interesting thing for me is the speed and swiftness with which Fox decided, first of all, they came out with some kind of fact-finding thing where they put on some kind of rebuttal fact-finding thing to check their own on-air personalities. And anytime something says, well, Fox News has talked to certain election experts and they've said, and they ran down this rebuttal of all their people, hoping that that would stave off the filing of the lawsuit. However, it did not. And once the lawsuit was filed naming Dobbs and Pirro and Bartiromo, it seems as if Dobbs didn't back off enough. And like, I guess what, we're taping Thursday, I think it was last Friday, and when we air the Monday, it'll be a week and a half. Fox just unceremoniously pulled the plug on Lou Dobbs. He didn't show, he didn't show up for his, I believe, Friday show. Some fill-in host was there and there was no goodbye, I'm leaving you folks, this is my last show, or Fox just said, no, you're gone.
Right, right. No, they did not give him a chance to say, you know, a goodbye or anything, or an explanation to his viewers. He was just, that was it. He was off the air, and he still has a contract. What they will do with that, I don't know. But yeah, it was quick.
And now it's interesting to see how that immediately affected the right-wing TV landscape, because I believe you can fill me in on this story, Bob, because I saw parts of it, but you probably saw more of it than I did. OAN, I believe, had, was it OAN or Newsmax? I think it was OAN, had the My Pillow guy, Mike Lindell, on.
Oh, that was Newsmax, I believe.
Newsmax?
Yes.
And they brought him on to talk about being banned on Twitter because he had become such a high profile purveyor of fictional stuff that was maligning the veracity of the election. That Twitter said enough is enough. We're going to ban you just like we banned the Orange Julius, who used to be in the White House. And so Newsmax wanted him to come on and talk about that. And correct me if I'm wrong, he went off on a
exactly, Eric. He went off on a tangent and started talking about the stolen election and about the issues, and he said he had all this evidence that he was going to produce that would prove it. And the one of the anchors, I think the name was Bob Sellers, I think is the
right.
one that I wrote down, and he had already had enough of Lindell.
He kept trying to break in and said, Mike, the elections was fair. We could
yes.
And he lost patience.
And he unceremoniously removed his mic and left the set and just walked off in the middle of the chat with Lindell and one other Newsmax host. So, I mean, he was in part protecting the network, which was already, you know, under legal action for
they had been put on notice that they were going to be sued if they didn't stop that crazy nonsense.
Yes.
So they had their statement ready, correct?
Yeah. I mean, they exactly. They were ready with a statement afterwards, and they're protecting their hindquarters again from the financial blowback from all of this false information that they've been guilty of purveying in the last few months after the election.
Interestingly enough, to stay on the right-wing media and this craziness that caused this current impeachment that's now ongoing, Lindell then got welcomed with open arms on Newsmax, and he produced some 2-hour, I don't want to say how long it was, this infomercial pretend documentary with him sitting behind some kind of news desk, where he pretty much tried to go down his point by point points of the fact that he had the proof about the stolen election. But of course, even though Newsmax aired it, they had a big disclaimer about what this program and content was all about. So they gave him the platform to continue purveying his falsity and his craziness, but they also put a big disclaimer about the fact that, okay, we're not challenging the election despite what this content says.
Right, right. It's a tightrope that they're walking now, and they're feeling it. So they're making an attempt to be careful. But here again, Newsmax is hardly one of these outlets I have a lot of respect for. So to begin with,
the interesting thing for me, though, that really bothers me is because I used to work for Disney ABC back in the day, as you well know, as our viewers know. WABC radio, which still has that ABC call sign, tends to be within that right-wing talk radio sphere because they love the dollars they get from right-wing talk radio, evidently. And you know who they carry on one of their shows? The guy who's being sued for 1.7 billion by Dominion, Rudy Giuliani. And so before his weekly radio show last week, before he started purveying his silly nonsense, they put a disclaimer prior to the show coming on saying, we do not condone, or this is not the usual disclaimer. The stuff you're gonna hear are just from this person, not from us.
right.
His reaction was a little, really? You're gonna do that to me on my own show? So
Once again, protecting themselves.
They are worried about the fact that Newsmax and Dominion mean business, and they're all trying to cut back. But there was a very interesting story along those lines that we were talking about earlier, and that is this assault on the Capitol that Donald Trump is now being tried in the Senate as part of an impeachment trial. The Times had an interesting profile about how big a role right-wing talk radio played in actually stoking the anger and stoking the echo chamber about the supposed stolen election. And the profile, the takeout on it was really, really interesting in that they called out Cumulus Radio, iHeart Radio, and I forget who the subsidiary of iHeart, which, another one of those big radio conglomerates who tend to dabble in talk radio. And it looks as if their people, because talk radio is so hard to keep a record of, so that when that stuff goes out in the air, what's said just goes into their listeners' ears, but there are very few transcripts and stuff available. And so they tend to push the envelope, but the key purveyors of that stuff, you may know the names better than I do, Bob, but Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Mark Levine, and some guy by the name Bogino, Bogino, or something like that.
Dan Bogino.
Yeah.
Bongino.
Spell it.
Yes. Bongino. Dan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Those four were predominantly the ones talking about the stolen election and just stoking the anger over and over again. They're just talking about how the Democrats do nothing but steal elections these days, and people are no longer going to take it, and they're just going to push back, and et cetera, and very little cautionary tales about whatever. So I don't know if you were you able to open any of that stuff, Bob? But
I was able to look at the beginning, and you could tell that they had a lot more energy right after the election. They were a lot more confident that possibly things might get flipped and there would be another Trump administration. And I think that by itself gave them the guts to continue spouting this stolen election BS and continue with the "you must fight" or "get into a rage," I guess was one of the quotes I just saw in the New York Times story. They had Trump actually won, they, I believe, would be continuing with the ranting and raving and allegations, knowing that they had a friend in the White House to possibly protect them against financial doom.
Yeah, but their rant and rave was all about the fact that the election was stolen, and they were ginning up their audience base with all that stuff. It's interesting because one of the quotes that I lifted from the story, and it was a New York Times story, said, quote, "In the immediate aftermath of the Capitol riot, radio executives seem to acknowledge concerns about a possible link between the violence and the shows. Cumulus, based in Atlanta, issued an internal memo on January 6th. Quote, "We need to help induce national calm now," all in caps, NOW caps. The memo added that the company, quote, "will not tolerate any suggestion that the election has not ended," end of quote, and that any transgression could result in termination. So evidently, they're a little bit cautious that folks might start to come after them as well when they start saying, hey, let's cool it a little bit here.
Right, the top management, the bean counters, again, could see the danger, because none of these radio networks operate on that big of a margin. They're never that far from posting a loss for the fiscal quarter or whatever. So they need to watch. They can't afford to throw money away
and based on interesting enough, the Times piece talks about the fact that even though that stuff goes out into the ether and normally doesn't get transcribed, he said the Massachusetts Institute of Technology has a project where they've started to chronicle that stuff. And here's a quote from that Times thing on the show. It says, "The analysis from the transcripts that the MIT people came up with on the Sean Hannity show, carried by more than 600 stations, the election was referred to as fraudulent, rigged, stolen, or illegal in 35 out of the 45 episodes transcribed by MIT. In that period, including comments from guests and callers, the election was referred to as fraudulent and rigged, stolen, or illegal in 32 of 45 episodes of Mr. Limbaugh's program. And after the Capitol riot, the same hosts denounced the violence. Quote, "Every good, decent, honorable American would condemn all violence," Mr. Hannity said on January 6th. But in the same broadcast, he reminded his listeners that, quote, "hundreds and hundreds of people had claimed to have witnessed fraud or irregularities in the election. Quote, people feel like their voices aren't being heard and they're angry," Mr. Hannity said. So he's still trying to walk that tightrope and still gin up his people, even though he's trying to say, be a little careful about what you say.
And I'm happy to see. I was reading it as you were, and I'm happy to see that schools like MIT are doing that kind of research. Which, to tell you the truth, isn't that hard for the common person to do. There's new software, and I don't hate promoting single products, but there's one called Otter, just like the animal.ai, and it will automatically transcribe, like us, an audio stream, and it's smart enough to distinguish between the people who are speaking, so they can put in your name and my name in later, in place of person one and person two. And the transcription is actually very good. You can search for words and for quotes and things like that. So I'm glad, hopefully in the future, more of these radio spiels will be analyzed better, so that we actually know what's going out there.
And if the transcription exists, then they might end up being a little bit more liable for what's said on their airwaves.
I think so. I mean, when I used to be a newspaper reporter, God knows I knew that if I wrote something, it's right there on paper. And if I got it wrong, I can't argue because it's right there on paper that I got it wrong.
So,
Hopefully we can bring the same level to radio.
oh, especially that right-wing talk radio sewer, because all they do is purvey a whole bunch of negative lies and propaganda, from what I've been able to see.
But
Hear about.
but you're right, Eric. They do manage to hang on to their audiences really well. I mean, Rush, look at the audience Rush Limbaugh has maintained all these decades, even though he's a proven hypocrite, and he's so loose and free with the facts that it would take a course, an entire college term to ferret out all of the mistakes he'll make in a single in the same period of time.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's just horrendous. Well, I don't know whether these lawsuits are going to have the kind of an effect, but they certainly seem to be having an effect on Fox and OANN and Newsmax. So maybe that's letting Cumulus and iHeartRadio and whoever those other folks are. Let me see who else. So our viewers know who these people are that are pervading.
Well, there's another one called Right Side Media, which or the Right Side Network, I tend to see on the streaming networks here and there. But, we're not arguing that we should see the demise of right-wing radio or streaming or TV. I guess, I'm sure you're with me, Eric. We're making the argument that if you're going to argue on the right side, argue with the facts.
Oh yeah, if you tell lies and spread this information and propaganda and malign people's names, you need to be held accountable legally. And so yeah, you can broadcast whatever you want within bounds. Once you cross that line, you need to pay the price. That's my argument.
And as we can see, they're starting to feel it. I tend to think, I'm hoping that this leads to a new period of the return of what I call the responsible Republican.
Hey.
Those who will defend their positions, but defend them with some level of dignity and facts. There's always two sides to a story and to a debate, and I get that. But this blind allegiance to Trump, which Republicans showed over the 4 years, needs to go.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because it all depends on who is trying to do what with what audience. And my contention is right-wing talk radio lets their host and their callers yell, scream, whatever they want to yell and scream because it gins up the audience and they get more listeners. And for them, that means more advertising dollars. And so as far as they're concerned, it's all about bottom line. It ain't about morality, not about truth, it's not about protecting democracy. And what always fries me is because radio is still part of the airwaves that belong to we the people. And so the FCC that used to have teeth that actually doles out these frequencies and let these people broadcast no longer has any teeth. And so the democracy gets shot full of holes when these people allow all this fraudulent stuff to go out on the airways without them being checked. So I'm happy to see these lawsuits coming along because since the FCC has no teeth, maybe the bottom line getting raked out from under these people might start to put them in check. But the flip side of that coin, speaking of what you were saying about how we need to think about two sides of the story. You remember Josh Hawley, the guy from Missouri?
Absolutely.
With the fist bump up for the insurrectionists of the Capitol. Well, interestingly enough, social media pushed so hard on that Penguin, the original publisher that was going to publish his book, immediately dropped him for his contributions to that assault on the Capitol.
Was it Penguin or Simon & Schuster? I just looked it up.
I think, yeah, it might be Simon.
Yeah, I just happened to see it fly by. Yeah, and I think it was Simon & Schuster.
Simon & Schuster basically said, no, we've got a contract with you that says you can't do certain things, especially stuff like that. That's actually, bottom line, going to damage our sales of your book, whether it's in good state or not. So we don't want you. And so they dropped him like a hot potato. But you know what? There's an outfit called Regnery, Regnery. And those are the people who published Donald Trump Jr., Yiannopoulos, the right-wing wacko who's always trying to tour college campuses, stirring up all kinds of crazy free speech stuff, even though he's preaching hate. Regnery is a conservative house that loves to publish anybody that will be on the conservative. So they immediately sucked up Josh Hawley's book. And Regnery basically said, oh, yeah, no, he's a conservative. We'll publish him. And guess what? The fact that Schuster dropped him, just going to gin up more publicity for us. We're going to sell more books.
They
That's
frankly,
what we're banking on.
yes, they frankly don't care about dignity or anything like that. You're right. It's in the news. It's in the media. They're going to get attention. So yeah, they snapped it up.
We could care less if he's helping to destroy the democracy of the country. We're going to sell books. Let's just publish him. And that's why I'm saying we got a problem in this country. Because if it all boils down to, oh, how many books can I sell? How many listeners can I get? What do I care about who is in the White House or whether they're there legitimately or not? It's just my bottom line that I care about. And
we have about a minute and a half left.
That for me is truly unforgivable, as they say.
I agree. And he's one of the new faces in Congress who thinks that he's going to evolve into the next Trump. No, you'll be gone before then.
We shall see how this all transpires. There are a couple of other things. I mean, we were giving the Times praise for, digging into some of these stories that needed to be tabbed. There's a story we still haven't had time to dig into, and that's the Times firing this freelance editor just because she tweeted that, geez, it was so refreshing to see Joe Biden's plane coming into land because because he's coming into office, and they fired her. They said we didn't fire her just on one tweet, but hey, we still didn't dig into it as much as I would like to. And because we haven't had time to, we don't want to pass judgment because we need to find out. They reversed themselves about not firing the guy who been with them for 45 years, but had that racist comment when he took these young people on a trip to Peru.
Yes, they have some work to do. I guess we'll get a chance to dig into it later.
Yep. All right. So I guess we're about out of time, aren't we? This has been Media Watch, folks. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on Twitter and YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And yes, we'll catch you the next time, folks. We have not holding out much hope for Republicans to vote to convict Donald Trump in this ongoing trial, but we shall see what we shall see.